Right, so hello and welcome back to Books and Things, and welcome to another video, and welcome to another Trollope Thursday. Today I'm going to be ranking all 47 of Anthony Trollope's novels. So if you're new here, hi, my name is Katie Lumsden. I'm an author and a booktuber, and I love the works of Victorian author Anthony Trollope. I think his books are fantastic, and I've now read all 47. So the time has come for me to rank all 47. I'm going to be doing a tier ranking, so we're going to head over to my computer in a second, and I will share my screen and tier rank all 47 of his books, which might take a while because 47 is quite a lot of novels for an author to have written. Because I have 47 novels to get through today, I'm probably not going to be talking about all of these in a great deal of detail, but what I thought I would do in order to give you some more detail about some of my favourite books by Anthony Trollope, next week's video will be a video dedicated to Anthony Trollope's two big series, the Barchester Chronicles and the Balatka novels, and then the week after that I will do a video talking in more detail about my top 10 standalone Anthony Trollope books. I say top 10, it might be a top 15. Basically, however many Anthony Trollope books make it into my top two tiers of my tier ranking today, I guess I will go through in that video and talk about them in more detail. I've read all of these 47 novels over the past 10.5 years, but some of them I read a few months ago and some of them I read 10 years ago, so some of them are less fresh in my mind. It did occur to me that if people would like a video reviewing all of Anthony Trollope's novels in more detail, something I could do is go through all of my previous monthly wrap-ups where I spoke about the different Anthony Trollope novels as and when I read them, and collate all of those clips into one giant video reviewing all 47 Anthony Trollope novels in the order that I read them. That would be, I think, a very long video. Like, I reckon that would be about 3 hours long. And it would obviously be a video of clips that some of you may have seen before. But if it would be helpful to have all of my sort of immediate reviews of Anthony Trollope's books in one place, let me know and I will edit that together. I think that's all I wanted to say in terms of the preamble. So now let me get over to my computer and get on with the ranking. Hello again. I'm now here by my computer in order to do a massive ranking of Anthony Trollope's novels. As I've done before with my ranking, I'm doing this on Canva just because I find that easier. I know there are other like tier ranking software things out there, but I'm just using Canva, so apologies for the sort of like formatting things that may turn up on the screen. I have here Anthony Trollope's 47 novels. I mean, they're not even actually all 47 here. They had to go on to the next page because there are so many, but I've put them all up on the screen. They are in publication order. I am pretty sure I have got the publication order correct, but I may have made some mistakes as I put the images in. Hopefully I haven't, but they are generally in publication order. As you can see, some of the covers have a little round thing in the corner, which I have put on. So the ones in red, numbered from 1 to 6, are the Barset Chronicles, and the ones with the little blue logo and numbers are the Balatka novels. I thought it might be helpful for people if I distinguish these. I probably think that this is a video you might want to watch on full screen because the covers are obviously quite small because there are so many for me to fit in, but I will obviously tell you the names of the books as I go. So first off, before I get into ranking all of his books, let me talk you through my 5 categories. So I have put 5 tiers for my tier ranking, but as you will see from the little star rating notes, they are not a 1 to 5 star tiers in any way, because the majority of Anthony Trollope's books are 4 or 5 stars for me. So the bottom tier here is Anthony, You've Let Me Down, which are the sort of 2 or 3 star books, of which there are only a handful. The next tier up is Middle of the Road, a sort of 3.5 star kind of novel, a novel I enjoyed but wouldn't say is like a must read Anthony Trollope, I suppose. Then I've got sort of really solid reads, a sort of good 4-star read, and then my penultimate tier is called Top Tier Trollope, which I know doesn't make any sense because that isn't the top tier, but basically I feel like if I just had a top tier, the top tier would be huge because there's so many Anthony Trollope books that are 5 stars for me. So what I have done is sort of effectively separate my top tier into 2. So there's the top tier Trollopes, which is the second tier, just, you know, confusingly, and then the absolute all-time favourites as the very, very top tier. So basically everything in the top 2 tiers are sort of top tier Trollopes, in my opinion. They're all amazing Anthony Trollope novels that I would highly, highly recommend, but I thought it would be helpful to distinguish the 5 stars from the like absolute all-time favourite books, because I think there will be quite a lot in that category, and distinguishing the books that are amazing from the books that are like super, super amazing, I thought might be helpful. So the first Anthony Trollope novel we have to rank, his first book is The Macdermots of Ballycloran. This is a novel set in Ireland about 2 siblings who continually find themselves in difficult situations, and about them and about their local priest's efforts to try and save them. I absolutely love this book. Is it a top tier Anthony Trollope or is it an all-time favourite? I think I'm probably going to put it in the top tier, by which I mean the second tier. This was a bad idea, wasn't it? Anyway, I've committed now. I think I'm going to put The Macdermots of Ballycloran as a 5-star, but not a 5-star plus, because I love it. I thought it was fantastic, but whether it would be sort of absolute all-time favourite Anthony Trollope, I don't know. Then next up we have The Kellys and the O'Kellys, which I put here in middle of the road, or do I want to put it in Anthony, You've Let Me Down? I think I'm going to put it in Anthony, You Let Me Down, because I think it is one of my least favourites. The Kellys and the O'Kellys is a novel set in Ireland, and it looks at a family called the Kellys and a family called the O'Kellys, who are from sort of different walks of life. I didn't like the Kellys and the O'Kellys that much. I found it not a very exciting Anthony Trollope book. Probably one of my least favourites as Anthony Trollope books go. I will be honest though, I've read it a long time ago and I don't remember it very well at all. So it might be that this is an unfair ranking and that it should really be in the sort of middle of the road category. Next we have Vendée, Anthony Trollope's third novel, which is his only historical novel. I think this one is set in the 1790s and looks at the counter-revolution in Vendée following the French Revolution. And I'm going to put this in the middle of the road because I thought it was interesting and I enjoyed the reading experience, but it definitely isn't a favourite Anthony Trollope book. Definitely not one I'd say is sort of a must-read. I would generally say that all of the sort of Anthony Trollope-esque bits of it to do with romantic relationships and that kind of thing I really enjoyed, but the sort of more dramatic battle scenes I don't think are the thing Anthony Trollope is best at. But next we get to The Warden, which is the first book in the Barset Chronicles, and I'm going to put it in really solid reads. The Warden is, as I said, the first novel in the Barsetshire Chronicles, and basically looks at the experiences of a man called Septimus Harding, who is a clergyman, and the income that he receives for being the warden of they call it a hospital, but it is effectively an elderly people's home. The money that he gets for being the warden of this hospital is called Into Question, and the book kind of looks at moral dilemmas. And it's a great novel, and I love Septimus Harding as a character a lot. And I love him even more in Barchester Towers, which is the sequel to The Warden, and I think I'm probably going to say is an absolute all-time favourite 5-star plus Anthony Trollope book. I love Barchester Towers. I think it's incredible. It's the second book in the Barset Chronicles and it is a direct sequel to The Warden. I don't recommend reading Barchester Towers unless you've read The Warden first. In general, I recommend reading his series in publication order. Barchester Towers looks at lots of different characters in the cathedral city of Barchester, where The Warden was also set, and particularly looks at what happens when a new bishop arrives in the town who is more low church than some other people, and there's sort of a high and low church battle, but there's also a lot of like intrigue and just amazing characterization, and it's just incredible. It's so good. Next book on my ranking is Dr. Thorne, which is the third book in the Barsetshire Chronicles and follows a young woman called Mary Thorne, and she and a young man called Frank Gresham are kind of in love with each other, but Frank's family would like him to marry someone with different social circumstances, and drama unfolds. I don't know whether to put this in middle of the road or really solid reads. I feel like I am unusual in not adoring Dr. Thorne. I do like it, but I think there are stronger Anthony Trollope books. And for me, it is one of his like more conventional, less exciting books, I would say. I think I'm going to put it in really solid because I think it is a 4-star read. Like, I wouldn't give it less than a 4 stars. It's definitely better than the Vendée, but I just think there are Anthony Trollope books I prefer. But I do also think it generally tends to be like a big favourite of people's, and I think I'm unusual in not putting it in absolute all-time favourites. Next we come to the Three Clerks. Oh, I love the Three Clerks. Does it go in top tier or I think it goes in top tier. by which I mean the second tier. The Three Clerks is the story of three civil service clerks and all of their antics, their difficult romantic relationships, their problems with money. One of them wants to be a writer. It's really delightful and very charming, and I had a great time with it, and I loved it very much. Very sort of quintessential cosy Anthony Trollope, but also all the civil service stuff, and the fact that one of them wants to be a writer really adds to that. Next we come to the Bertrams. I think I'm going to put that in middle of the road. The Bertrams has many elements, but the sort of core element is the relationship between two people who love each other but have different ideas about what is the right amount of money to have to live on, and therefore how long they should or shouldn't wait before they get married, and this causes all kinds of complications between them. And it is in many ways is a very good character study, but I basically feel like a lot of the themes and aspects explored in it are explored much better in Who Knew Who Was Right. If I wasn't comparing it to another book by Anthony Trollope, I would maybe think more highly of it, but I kind of feel like if you've read Who Knew Who Was Right, you've seen Anthony Trollope do this stuff better. There's also some sort of lengthy travels abroad in the Bertrams, which haven't aged well, shall we say. So that is worth knowing as well. I think I will keep that in middle of the road because it's not a favourite for me. Next we have Castle Richmond, which I think probably goes here in the second top tier. Castle Richmond is one of Anthony Trollope's novels set in Ireland. It's set during the Irish famine and looks at that really powerfully, as well as following the complicated romantic relationships of a young woman. And there's just some amazing side characters, especially the Countess of Desmond is just like absolutely incredible. And there are some truly outstanding scenes in Castle Richmond. I think it is just amazing. I'm almost wondering if it should be an absolute all-time favourites, but I don't think it is quite. Next we come to Framley Parsonage, which I think goes in this 5-star category. Framley Parsonage is book 4 in the Barset Chronicles, and looks at a young married man and his difficulties with money, as well as looking at his sister's sort of complicated love story. I think it's really, really marvellous. There's a lot of elements in it that I really love. And I think actually one of the reasons why Dr. Thorne kind of ranks more lowly for me is because the love story in Framley Parsonage and Dr. Thorne is quite similar, and I think it's just done better and is more interesting in Framley Parsonage, and there's also more things going on around it in Framley Parsonage that I love. And next we come to Orley Farm. I think Orley Farm also belongs in the 5 stars. Orley Farm is one of Anthony Trollope's messy inheritance novels. A man left his money on his death to his younger son, not his elder son from his first marriage, and when this younger son has grown up and is about to, you know, take over that property, his elder half-brother protests it. And it's mostly about the boy's mother, and it's just really, really good. It's really great. I love an inheritance novel. Next we have the struggles of Brown, Jones and Robinson. Have I got those names in the right order? Yes, I have. I'm going to put this in really solid reads. It's quite a different Anthony Trollope book, looking at the trials and tribulations of a small advertising firm in London. It's really great, worth a read. Next we have Rachel Ray. I think I'm actually going to put this in middle of the road rather than in really solid reads. So I do think it's worth a read. I did recommend Rachel Ray as a good place to start with Anthony Trollope in my Where to Start with Anthony Trollope videos, and I do think it's quite a good sort of gentle introduction into his work, though I don't think it's one of his sort of absolute strongest. But it is, as I said, a good introduction into his work, and it is in print, which is more than could be said for a lot of these books. Rachel Ray tells the story of a young woman. She is interested in a young man who works at the brewery nearby, but her family aren't sure whether he is the right sort of man, and everything goes on from there. Really interesting read. Next we come to The Small House at Allington, book 5 in the Barset Chronicles, which we are going to put straight in the absolute all-time favourites, because this is probably my favourite Anthony Trollope book. It is the wonderful story of two sisters who live in the small house near the big house at Allington. They are relatives of the squire there, and it is about their love stories and everyone around them, and I just love everything about it. I feel like it's a slightly Marmite book, and the reasons why I love it, I think, are the reasons why some people don't love it, but I think it's incredible and I just love it a lot. Next up is Can You Forgive Her, which is the first book in the Balatka series. So the Balatka series began before the Barchester Chronicles had ended, just to confuse you all. And Can You Forgive Her is a really good book that I will probably I'm going to put it in really solid reads for now, but I do feel like maybe if I had read it more recently, it might have been higher. I do remember really, really loving it, but it hasn't necessarily stayed with me. Can You Forgive Her is all about a young woman called Alice who has engaged herself to a young man when suddenly she decides, maybe I'm not so sure about him, maybe I would be better with someone else. And, you know, can you forgive her for the mess that she makes? It's great. Very, very dramatic, quite a dramatic Anthony Trollope. One I would definitely recommend. Next we have Miss Mackenzie. I think I'm also going to put that in really solid reads. This is a shorter, more focused Anthony Trollope novel about a woman in her 30s who has never really had any possibility of marriage, and then after her brother's death she inherits quite a bit of money, and suddenly she has lots of suitors around her, and it's about her experiences with that, and it's just a really great read. Next we have the Belton Estate. I think I'm going to put this in top tier Trollope's. It was quite a few years ago that I read it. I would really love to reread it. It's not hugely fresh in my mind, but I did love it so much when I read it. It has a love triangle, and it has a bit of a, not exactly a disputed inheritance, but a sort of like complications around inheritance plotline. And it's a really powerful novel, but also sort of a quite short and contained one that I just really recommend. And then next we have the final book in the Barchester Chronicles, The Last Chronicle of Barset, which again I'm going to put in the top tier Trollope's, which is the second tier. Really regretting my naming choices now. As it says on the tin, this is the final book in the Barchester Chronicles, and we follow many characters from many different books in the series. It's sort of a great Avengers Assemble of the Barchester Chronicles, featuring many people from many different books and kind of bringing lots of things together and finishing everything off, and it's just amazing. And you know what, I'm going to put it up in the absolute all-time favourites because I love it so much, and also because the Barchester Chronicles, it's my favourite book series ever, and the final Chronicle of Barset is like the bringing together of everything, and I love it, and it's just beautiful, and I was very emotionally invested, like so emotionally invested by that point. And that's why I really recommend you read all 6 in order, because I do think just your level of emotional investment by the time you get to the final book is just glorious. So yeah, what a book. I love Anthony Trollope. Okay, next we have the Claverings. I think I'm also going to put this straight into the absolute all-time favourites. I am actually rereading the Claverings at the moment, so I will have finished my reread by the time I do my like favourite standalones video, so maybe I will move it up and down, maybe I'll have more thoughts, but I love the Claverings. It is the story of Harry Clavering, who has recently got engaged to a young woman. Everything's kind of going well, but his former fiance who jilted him has just become a widow and comes back into his life, and drama ensues. But what I really love in the Claverings are the themes and the subplots, the way this book looks at marriage, and especially abusive marriages, and the control men can exert over women within marriage in the Victorian period is so powerful. And one of the like love story subplots is just like exquisitely beautiful, and I love it. So yeah, love the Claverings. Next we have Nina Balatka, which I'm going to put in really solid reads. This is the story of a young Christian woman living in Prague, who is in love with a Jewish man, and it's about how these two people fight against the prejudices of their neighbours and communities, and try to make their relationship work. And it's really powerful, and I would highly recommend it. Okay, I've done my first row. I'm not even halfway through. How long do you think this video is going to be? Next we have Linda Tressel. I am struggling to decide whether Linda Tressel belongs in absolute all-time favourites or top tier Trollope's. I think I'm going to put in top tier Trollope's, but when I rank my standalones, I may move it around. Linda Tressel is set in Nuremberg, and it's the story of a young woman who lives with her aunt and a lodger, and her aunt decides that it would be good for Linda to marry this lodger who is a lot older than her, who she doesn't like. And the book is really focused and intense and horrible, and is basically the long drawn out attempt of Linda's aunt to force her to marry this man, and it's horrible. Like, it's a really unpleasant reading experience, which is not the case for most Anthony Trollope. Like, I in general find his books so cozy, but Linda Tressel is not cozy. It is horrible, but it's so good. I think it's maybe like one of the best things he's ever written. Do I want to put it into the absolute all-time favourites? Probably not. I wouldn't return to it as like a cozy favourite, but also I do think it's absolutely amazing, and I would highly, highly recommend it. Next we have the second book in the Palace novels. This is Phineas Finn. I'm going to put this, I think, in middle of the road. I don't dislike Phineas Finn, but it's not a favourite, and my liking of Phineas Finn as a novel has been slightly marred by my dislike of its sequel, which we'll talk about in a minute. So I think I'm going to put it in middle of the road. This is about Phineas Finn, who comes to England from Ireland to make a career for himself as a politician, and we follow his unwise adventures in love and politics. The next book I have to rank is He Knew He Was Right, which is going straight up into the absolute all-time favourites. He Knew He Was Right is an incredible, incredible novel. Is it the best thing Anthony Trollope ever wrote? Maybe. He Knew He Was Right is the story of a marriage falling apart, of miscommunication and power and the problems of gender politics within the Victorian period, but also the subplots are absolutely incredible, and it contains maybe my favourite Anthony Trollope character ever, Miss Stanbury, who I just adore. So yes, He Knew He Was Right is incredible and very much belongs in my absolute all-time favourites. Next we have The Vicar of Bullhampton, which I'm going to put in top tier Trollops, but maybe kind of belongs in absolute all-time favourites. The Vicar of Bullhampton has sort of three plot lines, one of which is a love triangle, one of which is sort of church politics, land disputes, and one of which is something a lot darker with some sort of crime elements. I think The Vicar of Bullhampton is fantastic, would highly, highly recommend it. I also think it's a very quintessentially Anthony Trollope book. And next we have Ralph the Heir, which I think I'm going to put in the absolute all-time favourites, mostly because Ralph the Heir was the novel where, when I was reading Ralph the Heir a year or so ago, I was reading it and I suddenly thought to myself, what if Anthony Trollope's my favourite author? What if I love him more than Charles Dickens, or as much as Charles Dickens? And that was the first time reading any author ever since I was 14, where I was like, what if there's an author I love as much as Dickens? And Ralph the Heir was the Anthony Trollope book that first made me think that, so I feel like that gives it an absolute all-time favourite ranking. It is a great novel with lots of disputed inheritance stuff, featuring not one, not two, but three characters named Ralph Newbury, one of which is the heir to the estate, but his illegitimate cousin, also Ralph Newbury, isn't the heir, and this makes the current Ralph Newbury, who currently holds the estate, sad because he would like to leave it to his illegitimate son, but it's entailed, so he has to leave it to his nephew, his heir, and it's about the complicated situation there, and also the love stories of both Ralphs, and I just adore Ralph the Heir. I think it's such a wonderful novel, and there's nothing quite so quintessentially Anthony Trollope and quite so ridiculously Victorian as having three characters called Ralph Newbury. It is less complicated than it seems, I promise. Next we have Harry Hotspur of Humblethwaite, which I think I'm going to put in the Anthony You've Let Me Down category. This is not an Anthony Trollope novel I especially loved. I think it's one that I was quite enjoying for quite a lot of it, but I didn't like the ending at all, which is very unusual for me in Anthony Trollope. I would say usually Anthony Trollope makes plot decisions that I like, but for Harry Hotspur of Humblethwaite, I didn't love the plot decisions. I think there are themes explored in this book that he does better elsewhere. It's not hugely fresh in my mind, but it looks at a man called Harry Hotspur, his relationship with his daughter and his daughter's sort of complex love affairs. I just think there are stronger Anthony Trollope books. Next we have The Golden Lion of Granpère, which I guess I'm going to put in middle of the road. I did really enjoy this, but I think as Anthony Trollope books go, it's not the most special. The Golden Lion of Granpère is set in France and looks at an innkeeper and his relationship with his son, and also with a young woman who lives in the house, and it looks at the complicated sort of love story between these two young people. I often think of Linda Tressel, Nina Balatka and The Golden Lion of Granpère as a trio, because they are three books set in continental Europe rather than in Britain, and all three of them look at a young woman who receives a lot of sort of social pressure from her family to make one decision in marriage, which is not the decision she wants to make. They are three books with a sort of similar premise that go in very different directions. The Golden Lion of Granpère is definitely the least dark of the three, and therefore in a way it is the less interesting of the three, though I do think it's really good. And now I'm kind of wondering if I should move it up to really solid reads, but no, I think I'm going to leave it where it is. Next we have the Eustace Diamonds, which is the third book in the Balatka novels, which I'm also going to put in middle of the road. Many people, I think, really love the Eustace Diamonds, but it definitely wouldn't be a favourite of mine. I think partly because there are some elements of the plot that are quite similar to the Claverings, and I love the Claverings so much that I kind of find myself comparing the Eustace Diamonds to the Claverings and finding it wanting. The Eustace Diamonds contains a love triangle with a young man who finds himself sort of torn between a newer love and an older love. You can see how this relates back to the Claverings, and there's also a sort of subplot to do with who owns some diamonds. Not hugely fresh in my mind and not one that's hugely stayed with me. I do think the Balatka novels are worth a read, and some people really, really love the Eustace Diamonds. I just think it didn't click with me as much. And now we come to Phineas Redux. Phineas Redux is going straight into the Anthony, You've Let Me Down pile. It's my second least favourite Anthony Trollope book, I would say. The thing about Phineas Redux is that it is a direct sequel to Phineas Finn, an earlier novel in the Balatka series, and it sort of undoes some of the things in Phineas Finn that I really liked, which sort of spoiled Phineas Finn for me in retrospect, which is a shame. And also I just sort of disagree with quite a lot of the plot decisions in Phineas Redux. And I sort of think of it especially negatively because it was the first Anthony Trollope book I read that I didn't love. It's the first Anthony Trollope book that I read and I was like, oh, I don't really know why he's done that. I don't really like that. And so there are other Anthony Trollope books that I have felt that about, though not many, but because that was the first, it sort of gets especially low down in my rankings, if you see what I mean. Next we have Heathcote of Gangoil, which is also going into the Anthony, You've Let Me Down tier. Clearly, Anthony Trollope just had a run of like a few books I didn't really get on with. He was obviously just in a writing mood that didn't fit with my taste at that point in time. Heathcote of Gangoil is a short novel set in Australia at Christmas time about a young man and his homestead, and I remember very little about it, but I basically got nothing out of it. I think it's probably the only Anthony Trollope novel I would say that I got a 0 out of. Next we have Lady Anna. Ooh, where does Lady Anna go? Does it go in top tier Trollops or does it go in really solid? I think it probably goes in really solid. Lady Anna tells the story of a young woman called Anna. She is the daughter of a member of the nobility, but the question is she his legitimate daughter or not? And if she is his legitimate daughter, she is Lady Anna, but if she is his illegitimate daughter, she is not Lady Anna, she's just Anna. And she ends up with 2 suitors, one of whom is from the upper working classes, one of whom is from the upper classes, and the question is, you know, who should Anna choose and what is her social position? Really interesting novel. And now we come to The Way We Live Now, which goes straight up into the all-time favourites. I know I said earlier that The Small House at Allington was my favourite Anthony Trollope novel, and maybe it is, but maybe it's The Way We Live Now. The Way We Live Now is definitely my favourite Anthony Trollope standalone, and I love it hugely. It is about a man called Mr. Melmotte who comes into London with a lot of money. No one knows how he has made this money, but here he is with his fortune and everyone wants a piece of it, and we follow all of the people who are connected to him in some way, and all of the people who are trying to get hold of his fortune, and it's just amazing. In fact, I think it is the best Anthony Trollope book, though The Small House at Allington may be my favourite. The Way We Live Now is the best, but also so is He Knew He Was Right. Anyway, The Way We Live Now is an incredible novel that is so powerful, so fascinating, with so many interesting themes, so many interesting plots and subplots, so many interesting characters, and I just have a huge love for it. And I think it is a good place to start with Anthony Trollope if you don't mind a long book, because it really sort of shows you everything he can do and all the things he's interested in, and it's just great. Next we have The American Senator, which I think I'm going to put in top tier Trollops. I don't remember The American Senator as well as I would like to. This is one I'd be really keen to reread because I loved it when I read it, but it has been quite a while since I've read it and it's not as fresh in my mind as I would like it to be. I feel like what I mostly remember about The American Senator is thinking it was fantastic, but the sort of details of the plot have kind of escaped my mind. It is about a woman called Arabella who is kind of a fortune hunter, who I really, really enjoyed as a character, and it's about her efforts to get married and secure herself an income, as well as being about sort of rural life in England. There is an American senator in it, but it's not very much about him or about politics. I don't know why it's called The American Senator. There's a lot of fantastic characters in The American Senator. I really, really loved it. As I said, one I would definitely like to reread. Then next we have the 5th book in the Balatka novels, The Prime Minister, which I think is going into top tier Trollops rather than... yeah. I think it probably does belong in top tier Trollops rather than absolute all-time favourites. It may be that if I were to reread the Balatka series, the Prime Minister would go into absolute all-time favourites, but I think for now we're going to put it in top tier Trollops. The Prime Minister is a really incredible novel. As you may be able to tell from my ranking so far, I in general much prefer the Barchester Chronicles to the Palliser novels. I generally find the sort of more aristocratic political focus of the Palliser novels to be less interesting than the sort of small town and rural church politics of the Barset Chronicles, but that is very much personal taste. However, I do think the final two books in the Palliser series are incredible, and I do love the Prime Minister a lot. The Palliser series in part follow Plantagenet Palliser and his wife, and Plantagenet Palliser is a really incredible character, and I think in the Prime Minister you get to see some really fascinating elements of him and the things going on around him, and I just think it's a really interesting novel. Next on the list is An Eye for an Eye, which I think we're going to put in absolute all-time favourite 5-star plus Anthony Trollope books. This novel in some ways feels like a very quintessentially Anthony Trollope novel. We have a young man who is about to inherit a fortune, and is he going to marry someone who is of his social class, or is he going to marry the young woman he met in Ireland who he's in love with but is definitely not of his social class? And so there's so many things about it that feel quintessentially Anthony Trollope, but from the beginning you know that something dark is coming and you're waiting to see what it is, and it is great. Really good. Now we have Is He Popenjoy, which I don't know where to put. I feel like basically it belongs in Really Solid Reads and Anthony You've Let Me Down at once, which I guess means I will put it in middle of the road. Basically, for the first 3/4 of Is He Popenjoy, I was like, this is my new favourite Anthony Trollope book, what an incredible novel. And then I found the final third or quarter much less good. He introduced a random subplot that didn't need to be there, and it felt like the pacing was off, and he goes on a big rant about why he doesn't like women's rights, which annoyed me. And I know it's a Victorian novel, but still, when I consider how amazingly most of Anthony Trollope's female characters are written, it was a disappointing thing to find in one of his books. But anyway, Is He Popenjoy is the story of a marriage with some difficulties in it, and also the story of an inheritance question, as many of his books are. The weird title, Is He Popenjoy, relates to the fact that there is a man who is the holder of an estate, and he has had a son, and there are questions over whether or not his son is legitimate or illegitimate, and if his son is legitimate and the heir to the estate, then his sort of title would be Popenjoy. So Is He Popenjoy means, is he legitimate, basically. Next we have Cousin Henry, which I think I'm going to put in Really Solid Reads. Cousin Henry is a really great Anthony Trollope novel, and actually, interestingly, I would say that this is one of the books that I read a long time ago that has really stuck with me. Cousin Henry looks at an inheritance dispute because, Trollope loved them. It is about a man who has an estate and he doesn't know whether to leave it to his nephew, who he doesn't really like and doesn't think highly of, but who is a man and he does believe in primogeniture, or should he leave it to his niece, who he loves and is a good person but is a woman. Basically, his affection is at war with his sort of conservative principles, and the book looks at what happens from there, and it's a really good book. Should it be one tier higher? Anyway, it's fine. Next we have John Caldigate, which again, I don't quite know whether it belongs in the second or third tier. I'm going to put it in top tier Trollope, so I've changed my mind. John Caldigate was my final Anthony Trollope book, and I loved it. And it tells a story of a young man called John Caldigate who goes to Australia to try and make his fortune in gold mines at the beginning of the book, but the book is not actually about his time in Australia. It's really about what happens when he gets back to England and how his life in Australia sort of haunts his future in England, and it's really good. It's very hard to explain why John Caldigate is good and interesting and excellent, because all of the really interesting different things about it are massive spoilers, but it is really good. And I did think it was great. I also thought it was really well paced the whole way through, and I was very much on the edge of my seat. So yeah, highly recommend John Caldigate, very much indeed. So next we have The Duke's Children, which is the final book in the Palliser series, and this I'm going to put in top tier Trollops. As I said earlier, the Palliser series, in general, I love less than the Barset Chronicles, but the final two books in the Palliser series especially are just incredible, and it is worth reading the whole Palliser series for them. They have slightly blurred together in my mind because they are both just amazing and I read them really close together, but they are both really great, and I think the way that Plantagenet Palliser's life is looked at in The Duke's Children and the Prime Minister, and the way certain aspects of his life are looked at are just amazing. It's very hard for me to say more without spoilers because they are late books in the series, and they refer to many things that have happened before, but I just think The Duke's Children is magnificent and I highly, highly recommend it. Next we have Ayala's Angel, which is going straight into the absolute all-time favourites. I love Ayala's Angel so much. It is a story of two sisters who, after their father's death, end up sort of being moved between various relations, and it is about their love stories. And Ayala, one of the sisters, has in her mind this idea of this angel, this sort of perfect man that she wants to marry, and she has various suitors, but no one quite measures up to the angel in her mind. It is one of those Anthony Trollope books where, like, objectively I can admit that it is a bit repetitive, but my goodness did I love every single second of it. Rarely have I had such a thoroughly enjoyable reading experience of a book ever. It's just great. I highly, highly recommend Ayala's Angel. What an absolute joy it was. And what a great novel about unrequited love as well. No one writes about unrequited love quite as well as Anthony Trollope. Next we have Dr. Wurtle's School, which is also going straight into the absolute all-time favourites. I love Dr. Wurtle's School. This is one I'm hoping to reread very soon, because it has been a long time since I've read it and it's very short. So I'm hoping that I will have reread it by the time I do a video sort of talking in more detail about my absolute top favourites. But it's basically about a man who runs a school and a moral dilemma when he discovers something, a secret about one of his employees. And I just think Dr. Wurtle's School is fantastic, and I loved it very, very much. Next we have Kept in the Dark, which I don't know whether to put in Anthony, You've Let Me Down or middle of the road. I think I'll put it in middle of the road because I don't actually think that Kept in the Dark is a bad book. I just basically think that everything Anthony Trollope is doing in Kept in the Dark, he did better in He Knew He Was Right. A bit like the Bertrams, actually. There are obviously some themes that Anthony Trollope was interested in, especially to do with sort of miscommunication between couples. In He Knew He Was Right, he just does it to perfection, and therefore his other books that look at that too don't quite work as well for me. Kept in the Dark is a really interesting novel, but I kind of just read it thinking it's not as good as He Knew He Was Right, though, is it? Kept in the Dark is about a young woman who ends up not telling her fiancé about certain things in her past life, and it's about the complications that causes for them. It's an interesting novel, as I said, but I kind of feel like what he's trying to do in Kept in the Dark is done better in He Who Was Right. Next we have Marion Fay, which I think is going to go into my absolute all-time 5-star plus favourites because I just loved Marion Fay. This was one of the final Anthony Trollope books I read. I read it back in January and I was just so utterly emotionally invested in this book. Just so emotionally invested. There's maybe slight recency bias. I don't know whether in 2 years' time I will rank it as an absolute all-time favourites or just the top tier Trollope, but I did think it was wonderful. And it tells a story of a brother and sister who are from the aristocracy, and both of them fall in love with someone who is sort of beneath them in the Victorian social hierarchy. And it's about how their family react to that and how they go about that, and their relationships. And I just thought it was so good. There are some different unexpected elements to it that are really interesting that I can't tell you about without spoiling it, but make it a really fascinating, different, powerful novel. Next we have The Fixed Period, which is a really weird Anthony Trollope novel. It is a work of science fiction set in the 1960s about a former British colony that decides to introduce the law of the fixed period, meaning that everyone is only allowed to live to the age of 68. Bizarrely, I think it's Anthony Trollope's only novel to be written in the first person. What a strange novel to choose to write in the first person. It's a weird thought experiment that is fascinating, but I didn't love it. So I think I'm probably going to put it in middle of the road. I think it's probably one of those Anthony Trollope books that it's so different from his other stuff. It's a very interesting novel, and a very bizarre novel, but it's probably only one to read if you hear that premise and think that sounds fascinating. And it is, as I said, very different from the rest of his books. I don't think it's necessarily a book you would like or dislike, depending on your general thoughts about Anthony Trollope. Next, we have Mr. Scarborough's Family, which I think probably goes into really solid read. Mr. Scarborough's Family is a really, really interesting novel looking at a man called Mr. Scarborough who has 2 sons, and one son is sort of more respectable than the other, and it's about his will and how he's going to leave his property, as well as about various other characters. You know, there's lots and lots of subplots. One of the subplots looks at like male reputation, which I think is really, really interesting, because there are a lot of Victorian books that look at sort of a woman's reputation, but this book looks really interestingly at a man's reputation, and that makes it really, really interesting. I think it probably isn't like an absolute favourite of mine, because I think I like the inheritance stuff, but there are a lot of Anthony Trollope books that look at inheritance, and I think there are some that do it better, but I do think it's really worth a read. Next we have The Landleaguers, which was not Anthony Trollope's final novel published, but it was the novel he was working on when he died, and it is unfinished. And I also generally didn't really like it. So I'm going to put this in Anthony, You've Let Me Down. I would say that The Landleaguers is my least favourite Anthony Trollope book by probably quite a way. There's a lot in it that I struggled with and didn't really enjoy. There's a lot in it that has aged very badly and is, you know, just going to make you wince as a modern reader. I wasn't that invested in a lot of the plot, and it is unfinished. So I basically don't really recommend reading The Landleaguers unless you're going to read all of Anthony Trollope's books and want to read it for completion. And then finally, his last novel, which is finished but was published posthumously, is An Old Man's Love, which I'm going to put in top tier Trollope's, actually. I really like An Old Man's Love. I don't think it's going to be for everyone. It is about a man in his, I think he's just turned 50, and he falls in love with a woman in her late 20s, but previously she was in love with another man of her own age, and it's kind of a bit of a love triangle. I know some people don't get on with An Old Man's Love because the age gap in the relationship sort of turns them off the main character, but I think it's a really interesting novel. I don't think the main character is predatory at all, and there are some really interesting, powerful elements in it, and I just really, really liked it. So there we go. That's all 47 Anthony Trollope novels. I've only been filming for an hour. I thought this would take me longer than that. It's not quite as highly skewed as I thought it might be. I think because I have been, you know, a bit harsh with some of my ratings, and also, as I said, the sort of middle of the road is still like 3.5 stars. These are all great books. These bottom 5 I didn't love, but basically all of the rest of them I really, really enjoyed. Across the top 2 tiers, which are my sort of favourite Anthony Trollope books, my 5-star Anthony Trollope books, we have 24 books, which is, you know, half of his work, which I think is correct for an author I love as much as I do Anthony Trollope. As I said, I will be making a video talking about his series in more detail next week, and then the week after that I will do my top 10 to 15 standalones. If I take out the series books, across the top 2 tiers I have 18 favourite 5-star standalones, so maybe I will try to narrow down that ranking to like 10 or 15 and do a video talking in more detail about my absolute favourite Anthony Trollope standalones, but maybe I will do all 18 because it will be hard to choose. I should also say that there are many books in the sort of really solid reads category that I would also highly recommend. I basically really love Anthony Trollope and will recommend, you know, nearly everything he wrote. To be honest, the only thing I wouldn't recommend reading is The Landleaguers, but because there's only one book by him I wouldn't recommend. If you've read the other 46, you may as well read the final one. Don't leave it till last if you do want to read them all, because it's not very satisfying, as it's unfinished and not his best. So there we go. That is Anthony Trollope's 47 novels, tier ranked. I have really enjoyed doing this. Do let me know your thoughts down in the comments if you have any questions. I keep forgetting to say, but at some point in Trollope Thursday I will do a like Anthony Trollope FAQ. So if anyone has any questions about Anthony Trollope or his work, do feel free to leave me such questions in the comments and I will pull them all together. And also do let me know in the comments below if you would like me to collate all of my like mini reviews from my reading wrap-ups over the past 10 years of Anthony Trollope's books into one giant Anthony Trollope video where I talk about these books in more detail than I have here. I can do that if people would like to, but I also feel like it will take me a really long time, so I probably won't do that unless people specifically say that they would find that useful. Another thing I keep forgetting to say, but if you have been enjoying my Trollope Thursdays and you've been enjoying these videos, if you ever have a bit of money to spare to leave me a tip on Super Thanks on YouTube or over on Patreon, that would be very welcome. You don't have to do that. All of this content is here for free, but if you ever feel like doing that, that would be very nice and does help give me more time to spend on making these sort of longer videos that take a bit more time and editing. There we go. 47 novels by Anthony Trollope ranked. Has it been worth reading all 47? Yes, it has. I would highly recommend it. This has been really fun. Do let me know your thoughts down in the comments, and I'll be back very soon with another bookish video.